my biggest issue upon reflection has really just been the editing. Welcome to the Sundowners Club. I'm your host, Sean, and today I'm going to be discussing the season finale of Andor, episode 12, season 1. It's titled Rix Road. I'm going to be going solo today without my co-host Sterling, so I'm going to be with you. And first, before we get started, if you like what you hear and see today, leave a comment below, hit the like button, and most importantly, hit subscribe so that we can grow the channel. All right, let's get started. So we've been talking about Andor throughout this first season. I feel like there's been so many ups and downs. And I've really, before we get into the mechanics and the scene breakdown of the final episode, I do want to say that I've given a lot of thought to, the way each episode was laid out this season and some of the things I really liked and what I didn't like. And I know that there's a lot of thought out there around, is the show boring? Is it just for intellectuals and maybe not the non-core Star Wars fans? All that noise is out there, and we've been probably as guilty of that as anybody is, talking about the things that we liked and didn't like about the episodes. But I will say that my biggest issue upon reflection with this season has really just been the editing. I think that if you condense this 12-episode season and maybe condense it into 6 or 7 or maybe 8 episodes, I think that the pacing is a lot better. I think that the action sequences maybe have more weight. And I think the show will play a lot better to the audiences. I'm interested to see what the final numbers are going to be when the results are out for the season finale, because I think that throughout the course of different points in the season, viewers were lost. We had a certain group that would watch the first 3 episodes, and then I think there was a drop off, and then maybe it picked back up through the mid part of the season when there was a little bit more buzz after the episode 6 and the heist on Aldhani. And then I think it dipped again. And so we're going to talk about, was there a payoff in the season finale? I'm going to talk about where I think season 2 is going to go, and then final impressions as we end Andor season 1. So let's get started. Rix Road. We start out, there are 2 images that we see as the episode starts. We first see a young man on Ferrix who has lost, I believe it was his father that was tortured on Ferrix in episode 9 or 10. And he's building a bomb. And then we cut to Deidre, who's arriving on Ferrix. It's a cool scene visually of an Imperial shuttle that is landing on Ferrix. And Deidre is accompanied by Death Troopers. And I'll get into the Death Troopers a little bit later, but obviously those of you that have seen Rogue One know who the Death Troopers are. And I think that was a really cool scene as Deidre arrives on Ferrix, and we know that this is where the final stand is going to be for season 1, around the funeral of Marva and attempts to catch Cassian. And there are those on the Rebel side that maybe want Cassian dead, and then there are those on the ISB Imperial side, the Empire, that want Cassian alive so that they can catch Axis. So that's where the show starts. And right away, my first thought about the young boy building the bomb was, and I don't think it's any secret that they made these episodes this season of Andor trying to cater to an older audience. Obviously, I don't think you want kids watching an episode or a show where it shows a young kid building a bomb with all the things that, the geopolitical issues that a lot of countries are facing right now, the issues in this country that people are facing around mass shootings and crimes and things like that, terrorist activities and things around the world. I don't know about you, but this is obviously a scene that just proves the point that this was not a show for young kids. And I think that's important because that's a big chunk of an audience, a potential audience that you're losing on Disney Plus. And we've talked about in earlier episodes that this always felt like a show that maybe should not be on Disney Plus, that it should be on HBO or some other streaming platform, the way that the show dealt with more adult themes and showed some of the violence that maybe you haven't seen in Star Wars before. So not making a judgment on their creative decisions to show the kid making the bomb, but I think it just shows you that to me, that's an elimination, a squeezing out of a potential audience for the show. So probably a conscious choice that Lucasfilm made and that Tony Gilroy made that was approved by Kathleen Kennedy. we'll see in the final numbers. You spend over $180 million on a show. You need all the audience you can get. So we'll see if that ended up being the right decision in the long run, especially with all the changes that are going on at Disney. So, we get past that scene where the young boy's building the bomb, and we see Cassian arriving on Ferrix, and we see other characters arriving on Ferrix as well. Cyril with Sergeant Mosk. We also see Cinta and Vel are on Ferrix, and we see Luthen arriving. So everybody's converging on this funeral. And as Cassian initially is in hiding on Ferrix, I thought it was a pretty good scene. It played back to episode 6, the young man Nemec that got crushed on the ship when they were leaving Aldhani, and he ended up dying. And I thought it was a really good scene. He's speaking, and Cassian is hearing his voice, and what he says is, remember this: freedom is a pure idea. Tyranny requires constant effort. It breaks. It leaks. It's brittle. Authority is the mask of fear. One single thing will break the siege. Remember this. Try. And so I thought that was a cool scene. It played back to a character that I thought we were probably going to see more of, but then he dies. And so Cassian is remembering what this whole journey's all about and his place within it. And so they're laying the groundwork for the essence of what the rebellion's all about, at least in Cassian's mind. I thought that was a good scene. There was a little bit of a payoff there. And Cassian's then reunited with Brasso, who we talked about last week with the B unit droid, and he obviously is getting him up to speed on trying to help him maneuver to get Bix out of her containment, that she's being held captive, and so they're working in the kind of the underground tunnels on Ferrix, and so we see a little bit of that. Then we cut to a scene with Mon Mothma, in the episode where she is basically setting her husband Perrin up by accusing him of gambling, and she even makes a call back to The Last Jedi about, well, why don't you just go to Canto Bight and gamble? And she does this knowing that the driver for her shuttle is a spy and is reporting back to the ISB. And so she's setting Perrin up in case anything comes up about her finances. And so I thought that was a really cool scene. She's starting to do the things that Luthen talked about earlier in the season about doing what you have to do for the rebellion, things that you don't always like. But so we see that from her, and I thought that was a pretty cool scene. We also see in Ferrix that as Brasso is walking around and Cinta and Vel are moving around, we've got spies. So we've got this character, Nurchi, that gets wind of what Brasso is up to, and so he goes to Deidre and Corv and tells that Andor is going to be up in the tower. And so, we're setting the stage for them to try to catch Andor alive. And I thought that was well done. I thought that they're setting up the suspense of what's coming in the episode via the funeral. You know that the tension is there as they begin to ready the funeral procession. And then we have there's a mention when we're back on Coruscant, which was a little frustrating, and is one of the issues this season. Even though I talk about that they had too many episodes, I think that the editing was the single biggest issue for me in the season. If I had to point out one thing, it wasn't the writing, it wasn't the acting, it wasn't the casting, it wasn't the cinematography, the direction. All that was fine. The editing was the biggest issue, but I think if they were going to spend time like they did in the prison system in the bottom third of the season with Kino and the other characters, Melshi and Andor, they should have at least shown us when they talk about Anton Krieger and the siege on Spellhouse, they talked about this 4 or 5 times building towards it. We even saw a hologram of Anton Krieger. And then they turn around and it just gets mentioned that they all got wiped out. Oh yeah, by the way, we got Krieger, and so I thought that was a waste. Why even cover some of that as much as they did, just to have it just be swept away? It was almost like an afterthought. I didn't think that was well thought out. That was one of the issues in the finale that I didn't like, is they didn't show any of that. And so then we get to the funeral. And another thing that I think has happened repeatedly, not just in this series, but in some other Star Wars series. The first thing that comes to mind is the Book of Boba Fett, when we saw these, they look like souped up hot rods on Tatooine, where they're green and blue and red and all these vibrant colors in an otherwise dusty and industrial looking place. On this show, we see drums and horns, and we're in a galaxy far, far away, right? We're on another planet. And I thought, okay, if you're going to have horn sounds and drum sounds, can you spend just a little bit of time changing the devices that they're using, where it doesn't really look like a drum, or it looks like something that's more high tech, or something that would be in a galaxy far, far away? It's literally a drum, and they're literally got horns. And the other thing that I've seen, and not just this show, but in Obi-Wan as well, is the blasters look like regular guns. So, I don't know whether it's just lack of spending the money on that, or they're just moving too fast to be able to spend the time on those attention to details. But that takes me out of the episodes. I don't know about you guys, but a little frustrating when I see that. It was like, what's going on here? But so they set up the drums and the horns, and they start the funeral procession. And as the parade gets underway, we see the Imperial forces are scrambling to block them because they don't know exactly what's going on, and the crowds are gathering. And so that suspense is starting to build. And we see Deidre thinking she's going to catch Cassian, but by the time she gets to the tower, Cassian is gone, and he's making his way to go get Bix. And so as that happens, I think one of the other scenes that was pretty cool was of two scenes that I really enjoyed in the episode. Was we see a hologram of Marva as they get to a stopping point. They're being blocked by the Empire, and the situation is tense. And then the B unit displays a large hologram of Marva, and she gives a speech, about basically, of how she had one regret in her life, that she was asleep too long, and that it would be to wake up to the Empire's tightening grip. Darkness is like rust. And then she says to everyone with a final rallying cry, "Fight the Empire." And as that happens, the Empire is trying to stop the hologram. They knock the B unit over. And as this is going on, you start to see a riot. And as the riot happens, obviously the character, I think it was Pac, that I talked about, his son building the bomb. He takes the bomb out, tosses it in the crowd. It blows up, and then it detonates a bunch of Imperial devices that end up blowing up. So it becomes a huge explosion. You don't know how many people are dead, but it's mass chaos. At that point, the stormtroopers are firing. They're firing from up top on the rooftops, and it's complete chaos. And now we've got an all-out assault and violent riot that's going on Ferrix, the beginnings of the real rebellion. And as that's happening, one of the funny scenes was that Cyril sees Deidre, and Deidre, let me go back to the Death Troopers for a minute. She arrives on Ferrix, but by the time she's out on the street, she's really got no protection. She gets hit, knocked down, and the mob starts to take her. Where are the Death Troopers? I don't know. So she's completely unprotected, and as she's going to get drug away and potentially killed or taken hostage, Cyril shows up, puts a gun in her back, and acts like he's part of the mob, but he gets her into a building, into what's amounts to a storage closet. And it's a very strange scene. Cyril, I don't know if they set Cyril up to be this creepy stalker all season, and that's really the character that he has become, but it's very strange. It's awkward, and you think they're going to kiss. You think these two people are meant to be together. She's scared. She's frightened, but then she realizes that he saved her. And so it's a very awkward moment, a little creepy. The creepy closet scene with Cyril. I think every scene Cyril's had this whole season's been creepy. Maybe that's the way they wrote him. But so I thought that was humoring to see her facial reaction to Cyril, because Deidre does a great job acting. The actress that plays Deidre has done a great job all season long. She's probably my second favorite in the season, next to Luthen. But then we get back to Cassian, and he's gotten Bix and Brasso, and they've gotten out past all the fighting, and they've made it to a salvage yard, pegless salvage yard, and Cassian puts them on the ship to get off planet, and you see that there's still damage that's been done. to Bix, and she says Cassian will come back. He'll find us. And Cassian knows that she's still suffering and says, "I'll find you." And but Cassian leaves, and he says goodbye to the B unit. And we see after that happens, we see Luthen on his speeder riding back out to his ship. And as Luthen shows up, he realizes something's amiss on his ship. He turns around, and it's Cassian. And so for the first time this episode, somebody has actually seen Cassian that is trying to find him, and he's faced with Luthen. Nobody else in the episode came close to Cassian. It didn't seem like there was any risk they were going to not escape with Bix. It didn't seem like there was any risk for Brasso. Didn't seem like there was any risk for Cinta, although Cinta did stab one of the Imperial spies. But other than Cinta, Val wasn't threatened. Luthen wasn't threatened. They all made their way out. So it didn't seem like there was a lot of drama around these characters getting out of this tense scene. That's one of the issues I had when the fighting broke out was, where was the imminent danger? You didn't feel that. Everybody just kind of made their way out, and as the chaos ensued. So Cassian's standing there, and he knows what Luthen has tried to do. And Cassian says, "You came to kill me." And Luthen tells him, "You don't make it easy." And Cassian says, I will now. And he's laid the blaster down. And so he gives Luthen the option, kill me or take me with you. And so Luthen, stares at him and then smiles. And obviously he knows Andor is much more valuable alive than dead. And he's much more valuable to this cause. And based on what he's just seen happen, the beginning of the rebellion. And so, the show cuts out and fades to black with Luthen and Andor now together and the beginnings of the rebellion. And if you stay through the credits run for about two or 3 minutes. Then you see a mid-credit scene. And we go back to the payoff of what's happened in the prison when Andor and Kino and Melshi and all the rest of the prisoners were making these devices and these parts that we speculated were for the Death Star. Well, we see that they were indeed parts for the Death Star. The Death Star is being assembled. The center of the Death Star, the foundation of it, the shell is already completed, and then the middle part is being put together with these parts that were being done with the prison, which explains why they wanted to kill all the prisoners. They did not want it to get out that they were building the Death Star. So that's how season 1 ends. Final thoughts. I have mixed emotions about Andor. I think you can find videos all over YouTube where people love it, they cater to it, and that's great. I could see that. I wouldn't argue with anybody that loves the show, especially if they're Star Wars fans. I applaud them for that. I don't agree with people that maybe hate it or say that it's awful. I don't think that's the case either. I think the show has its moments. I think that there was just too much supposition going on, and I really think when I really digest the whole season, I think the biggest issue was in the editing. I think they should have condensed this show down. I don't know. They definitely did not need 12 episodes. And I hate to say that because when something's really good, I usually want a lot more of it from a show. So I think that it was just too much talking, not enough action. Some of the fight scenes, battle scenes did not have the payoff. It's like they spent all this time building up, and then the payoffs were very minor and brief. And I think with what we've seen online with the budget of $15 million per episode for a total of $180 million to make this show, I just think that we'll see the final numbers, but the audience wasn't there. And I think that when you don't have kids able to watch Star Wars content, that limits your audience. And I think when you take it to a place where the lore, the myth around the Force and some of the things that Star Wars has traditionally had, that limits the audience. And so I think that they started out, trying to swim upstream and battle a tide that I don't think they were going to win. So it's going to be interesting to see how much money they spend on season 2. What's the budget? Is it going to be 12 episodes? Are they going to change that model, that plan? They're going to be filming soon. I don't know. I liked about half of the season, and about half the season I could have done without. I think the show was average. I like it better than some of the other shows that have been on Disney Plus that have covered Star Wars. I would rate it obviously below Mandalorian, and I would rate it above Obi-Wan and above Book of Boba Fett. So I don't think it's a bad show. I think it's worth watching if you enjoy science fiction, spy thrillers. You might enjoy it if you're a Star Wars fan. But that's where I fall. I think the show was average at best. It had its moments, and it also had some issues. Not a perfect show by any means. Hope you guys enjoyed season 1. And if you've stuck along with us for the ride, we will obviously cover all Star Wars content. And when season 2 arrives, we'll be here to cover it. Remember, if you like what you saw and heard today, leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button. And most importantly, hit subscribe so that we can grow the channel. And TCB.